I'm just kidding. It doesn't really get real. We just
Oh,
act silly.
yes.
Um, okay, cool. Awesome. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are here today with both Jonathan Kravetz, the author of How We Were Before, which just came out in May, and his incredible editor, um, Ben. So
He's just known by Ben. That's all you have to say is Ben.
that's true. All you have to say is Ben. Yeah,
I'm pushing for
everyone.
the one name status
Right.
with
Woo!
an exclamation point, of course.
It has to have the exclamation point. Absolutely. Otherwise, it just doesn't count, you know.
Because you have to be the exclamation point in your own life
You
sometimes.
clearly, clearly you have to be that exclamation point. So for anyone who's watching and you're not familiar with us, what we like to do is we like to sit down with the author of one of our amazing stories and his or her editor, in this case his, and just basically ask questions about um, them working together and all that kind of fabulousness. Before I dive into that, I'm actually going to first do a brief introduction of Jonathan. So, the book that we are actually focused on is How We Were Before. Again, it came out May 20th. And a quick overview: when a savage home invasion results in the death of a town's most glamorous couple, the surviving friends and relatives of the victims must navigate the emotional aftermath. Exasperated, high school vice principal Zachary Rivers makes a final effort to reach a troubled student. Town librarian Shelby Blythe, the eldest daughter of the murder victims, begins a correspondence with Billy Lawson, her parent. Evelyn Kavanaugh, a retired marketing manager and beloved family friend of the Blythes, embarks on a luxurious cruise as a prelude to suicide. And Noam Russell, Billy Lawson's best friend, returns to Benfield to claim a share of his deceased father's estate. Samantha Blythe's maternal attempt to help an employee evokes a renewed desire to connect with her own family, and the spaces between stories are haunted by echoes of the deceased couple's life, from the ignorant bliss of first impressions and great expectations to the tumultuous troubles of middle age, and finally, an undying hope for reconciliation. So, with all of that, what I need to ask first is, um, knowing our process for assigning editors, and for those who may not be familiar, what we do is when we acquire a new story and it comes time to assign an editor, we basically put a call out to editors that we think might be a good fit and ask them if it's something that they would be interested in working on, because we really want to make sure that the editor is someone who a- enjoys the story and can see it, really um, just being absolutely fantastic. Or maybe they already believe that it's absolutely fantastic. So, with all of that prelude, what I need to ask is, so Ben, what attracted you to How We Were Before?
Well, initially, of course, it was uh, for me. It was the story, and I hesitate there because it's a balance between another acquisition editor who always looks for good writing and recognize that as well. So we were discussing that of a good story and good writing. That's the hook,
Mm,
and that's what's going to pull us in. Personally, I saw the story uh, as a an idea that I personally had was about a small town in America losing their hometown hero in a war and what
mm,
that would do subsequently. And then I saw this story and I said, well, wait a minute, that's kind of the same thing. There's been a tragedy in this town
mm,
and it's going to ripple out and have impacts for into the future on more than just the family and friends. It's going to impact the whole town. So it was more of a story. In addition, it was a story about place
mm.
and what happens to a place and the personality of a place with those memories that the personality has to face. And so that was the hook with the story and the good writing, of course, and the characters. The characters were real. They had gone through a tragedy, and we're going to back up and tell the story of the tragedy and how it happened and what was happening to the couple that were murdered and their family. But then we're going to speed up to the future and see those impacts, like I talk about the impacts of the event on the town.
Wow, fabulous. So with that, Jonathan, what inspired you to write this story, and in the manner in which you did? So to Ben's point, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to write a story from more of a classic thriller or even to a certain extent like a crime mystery of some sort, you chose to instead look at those who were impacted by the loss of this for that town iconic family, and that in that way the reader gets to experience not only the loss but also the couple as well.
Right. The book kind of came together through a slow process. I didn't actually have the idea like, oh, this is like the way Ben described his idea. I didn't have that idea for my book initially. I was writing some short stories. I'd written maybe a couple of them, and I found myself writing about place where I grew up. And, Ben mentioned place, and I think that is really, really important to the book. The stories take place in a fictionalized version of like a couple of towns town where I grew up and a town where I worked later, and they're very close to each other. And so all of the people and the ideas I think are really drawn from just my experiences of being in that place. And after writing a couple, I had the idea, I'd been reading some books of connected stories, and it occurred to me, hey, I could do this. Part of me was a little tired of getting a lot of rejection letters from some of my other novels, and I thought at the very least I'll have these short stories that I can send out at the end if I'm unable to publish this. And then it was just a question of trying to figure out what was going to be the thread to tie these together before I wrote the rest of the stories. And I actually went through a couple of different ideas. Most of the others were kind of terrible. Like I had the idea of writing the history of the town. I think I mentioned this in a prior meeting that we had. And I tried that, but it was really difficult to make it compelling at all. I mean, why do we even care about this history of the town? We really needed characters. And that's when I came up with the idea of the glamorous couple and using that to kind of pull us through the book and then tying everything to that.
Now, what inspired you to write these specific characters? And was there inspiration in individuals that you had previously known? Was it more like when you were writing these short stories, you said, hey, you know what? I should write this from the perspective of the daughter. And, ooh, why don't we have her actually talking to the murderer, right?
It was more of the second thing. A little of the first, but mostly the second thing. None of the characters in the book are based on actual people. But I did work at a small weekly.
Just kidding.
It's all about me.
Obviously.
No, I did work at a small weekly newspaper, and so just my experiences of working in a newspaper, I pulled from that for the first story in the book. And there were some things that happened. There was a police chief who was stealing drugs from the stash of drugs that they had and selling them. That really did happen. So there were things like that I pulled from. The double murder happened in my hometown when I was a kid. So I kind of pulled from these events, but the characters themselves were more the way you described. I didn't even realize when I started the book, the story of Shelby, for example, the daughter, that she would correspond with the murderer. I had this idea of her being angry and resentful of her parents, and I began with that, and then that led to this idea that she's corresponding with him, and then then from there.
Got it.
Mhm.
So with that, I'm gonna go back to the whole, so how you guys work together on refining these stories. So Ben, what was your approach in working with Jonathan on that editorial process?
Well, before we go there, I would just add that the hearing that being described, there's a question that comes up: would someone actually want to correspond with someone who killed their parents? And Jonathan handled that very nicely with the backstory of that character as a child. There's tension there when she's a child. It's never fully explained. It's never fully, this is what's going on. It was just in her behaviors, which is a great way to get to someone's psyche. And then it made it to where, yes, this character would contact the killer of her parents just for her own closure or information, or to solve that mystery and get more insight. So it was a comprehensive look at the character, and to make sure when she was little there were still some tensions going on there. But that added, we can jump up to the process. And it was one of those novels that, again, being well written, it was a very easy novel to edit. And because you weren't wrapped around spending your time with the flow of the story and the things being out of place, or wait a minute, you said that person did this back then, but now they're doing this. What happened? Why did that happen? Or what happened to the car they were driving? It's not the same car anymore. But those type of things, we didn't have those discussions, and
you didn't need to.
Didn't need to, right?
Right.
And it was any questions that we had. The one that comes out to me is something the character did when she was little. It was kind of a loose end, and that raised the question of, I'm not sure she would do that, and why did she do that in front of her sister, and why did she do that with these friends, and why did this happen? And Jonathan came back and said, well, this, and this, but I hear you here, and hear you. And so we had that conversation to tighten it up. And that was, but those instances were very, very few, very rare and far between. But so the overall process was, Jonathan was a treat to work with, and he was open to hearing what I was saying, because I edit from a reader's point of view, and if you confuse the reader and you make the reader mad, it's not what the author wants, ever wants. And I told Jonathan that you don't want to make that reader mad at you and put your book down. Whether they've already bought it or not, they might talk to a friend. So we want to make sure we keep them happy. And so those type of conversations went on from the reader's point of view. I said, Jonathan, this is what the reader is hearing. You as the author, you could have read it 1,000 times and not seen anything except what you wanted to see. And so to hear it from the reader's perspective, it can be an eye opener. And for Jonathan, I think it was. It opened up his creativity to, let's polish that, let's correct that. And so it made that relationship very easy to have those conversations.
Wow. And Jonathan, from your perspective, what was the editing process like?
It's a 180 from what we just said.
It sucked. Then
it was
horrible.
the worst experience of my life. I only came on here to tell Ben that. No.
Knew it.
No, not at all. I mean, completely agree with Ben. It was a very easy relationship. It was very easy back and forth between us. I come from a theater background. I've written plays, and so in theater, when you write a play, part of the process is feedback. I mean, it's almost to the point where it's too much, where you're just like, you can't ever get out of the workshopping phase of writing your play, but I've written plays and brought them into rehearsals with actors when they're brand new plays, and get feedback from the actors and the director, and always makes it better. Mm-hmm. And so I really like that part of the process. I really miss the collaborative aspect of doing theater. So it was, for me, something I actually look forward to hearing from an ed, believe it or not. That when someone tells me, hey, I'm speaking from the reader's point of view, mm-hmm. this part isn't going to ring true, then I'm going to listen and see what I can do. And there was maybe only one, like the issue that he described about the Shelby in her childhood was maybe the only time where we had like a little bit of a back and forth, where I felt strongly about mm-hmm. keeping that. So it was kind of fun.
Excellent. And with that, is there anything else that you, Ben or Jonathan, would like to share with our audience?
About, I mean, anything. I can tell you my whole life story.
Sure.
Oh boy. I mean, I don't know. I have some readings coming up.
Excellent.
So I don't know how many people are living on the East Coast who are watching this, but I have a reading next Saturday in Catskill, New York.
Oh, nice.
I mentioned theater. I have some theater people I work with up there, so I'm going up there for a reading. I just had one in Massachusetts last week.
Oh, wow.
That was my first reading, and that went really well mm-hmm. at a bookstore called An Unlikely Story, mm-hmm. An indie bookstore, which I highly recommend checking out. Great people there.
Excellent.
And then I'll have one kind of my book launch, technically my book launch party, even though it's the third event mm-hmm. in Manhattan on the 25th of June at a bar in East Village. And people can go to my website to learn more about that. Is my website here? No, JonathanKravetz.com. So my name's there. You just put a .com at the end. No spaces. I think I don't know. Ben, any thoughts or questions?
I think again, the story itself is based on what happens in the continuation of life after that tragic event, to a place and to the people, and you can visualize it. It's just any small town America that you drive through, but it would raise those questions as you drive through. What happened here? What's this place's story? Mm-hmm. And how we were before captures that very nicely, and tells that story from a different, a lot of different perspectives of people. But what they have in common is that place. This is my hometown. This is where I'm from, and going back and remembering what went on in high school and what's going on between people. It's real. And but it's, in this case, how we were before shows why it's real. What is impacting those personalities of the people in the place.
Thanks, Ben. And that does bring up a question for me. I wonder if you've started writing your piece.
What's the use now, Jonathan?
What's that?
What's the use now?
No, or does like editing something like this kind of scratch that itch, or does it inspire you to try to work on it? I mean, I'm kind of curious.
I think it scratches the itch, but it also makes me creatively need to go deeper and in a different direction, because and so it doesn't come across like, oh, he edited Jonathan's book and look what he wrote. What a thief.
Please steal. It's fine. That's how it works.
But, and of course it would be different works, of course, but it's still, the premise is still the same of what happens to a town after a tragedy. And so I haven't thrown it away. and it's still trickling around back there. It says,
Yeah.
"Write me." We all have
Yeah.
that voice, and we got to listen
Yes.
to it. But it was good to see that you had actually gone through with the idea, and it made it an idea, not my idea, not your idea, but an idea that you worked with and made work. And so that's kudos to you.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Ben.
Absolutely. And with that, I want to thank, I love that I suddenly had an echo. Okay. And with that, I want to thank Jonathan and Ben for joining us today. This was actually, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Anyone who's watching this, and if you're watching the recording, if you have any questions for Ben or Jonathan or even myself, feel free to pop them in the chat. And we do regularly go and look at the questions. So we're happy to forward any along to Jonathan that you may have. And if there's questions that it may have a broader reach, then we will most likely address them during our weekly Run Wild with Us, Ask Us Anything. So, and again,
before we
sorry,
go
go ahead.
if I could ask Jonathan, during the process, we had a lot of conversations, but then you've interviewed me and Lisa for your newsletter, and we wrote down some responses. Were there things that we said that came as a surprise or an eye opener or any different facet that we haven't talked about today?
I don't think so. No. Was there something you had in mind in particular?
No. I was just going to check from the author's point of view again to see what there may have been or any takeaways that you have had during our initial relationship all the way through today.
No, I mean, I could see the ways in which I understand why you took my book, having talked to you guys a few times and interviewed you, and just what attracts you to a book, to something, the stories, and so I think a lot of that came through in those interviews. I think you did say a good bit about why you take a certain book. So if you do get questions and people want to see those interviews, they can write to me, and I can certainly send those interviews on to them if they'd like, or they can subscribe to my newsletter and I can send them.
Absolutely. And it's a great newsletter, by the way. Definitely check it out. And Jonathan's great at keeping track of all of the different events that he is going to be doing. So if you are curious and you want to check out those events, definitely go to his website, which I did include in the chat, and subscribe to his newsletter. I think you'll be really happy with it. So
yeah, and if people do specifically want to see those interviews, they need to write to me, because they won't come to them automatically, because they've already come in the past, so I'll have to resend them to them.
That's fair. That makes sense. Excellent. Any other questions, guys, or commentary?
Just thank you both. It's been a long journey to the book finally coming out last week or 2 weeks ago, but it's been great, and I really appreciate it for both of you.
Well, thank you for writing such a great collection. So excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And again, if you have any additional questions or you have any not just questions, but comments, feel free, go ahead, put it in the comments section, and we will absolutely get back to you. So with that, again, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Ben. And we will talk to you both soon.
Okay. Thanks, guys.